Okay, so motivation. And I guess as I sat down and thought about motivation, the first thing I thought was we're always trying to motivate children. And I think what's really important, and I haven't got the answers for it, is what motivates us. Because sometimes as a teacher you get dragged down and you find yourself in a place where you don't feel motivated. And so at least I want to ask you the question, have you thought recently what motivates you? Now the answer might be a bit politically incorrect, stuff that you're not allowed to do or it would be wrong to, or whatever, but I still think it's important that we ask it. Because sometimes we can end up with a whole group of work and classes and stuff and not feel motivated. And we're in charge of motivating others. And it might be that in our own private lives we're not doing A or B or C, but it might also be in terms of school, what I like doing, what gives me a buzz is, and if we're feeling buzzy, then we less have to try and make the children motivated, because, so it's about working on ourselves, and I don't know what each one is for you, and this is a 15-minute forum, not an hour and 15 minutes, so really the question is there for you. But that's why it's down there to start with. And I wrote down for myself, celebration of, I meant my success. So if I ever get any feedback that's positive, I frame it because I'm really proud of it. And that does it for me, but it may not do it for you. But whatever does it for you. So I have to try and celebrate my own success and just go out of my way to do it so that I remember it in the dark days for me. But as I say, that's just one example. It's more about, I want you to go away, not with answers, but with questions. And one question is, what will motivate me? Meaning you, not me. So this is going to comprise sort of various stories. And one story, obviously we can't mention students, but sometimes it says leaving the door open to discovery. Sometimes you have a class where you think, oh God, here we go. And you're teaching a topic that you don't particularly like, and you think they don't particularly like. And I remember once teaching the area of a trapezium, which is one of the more boring, if not most boring bits in maths. It really has got no point at all, you'd never do it. And I got this like set 4 out of 5 in a different school, and I've got this guy who's quite a thug in there, and I was actually quite frightened of him. He hated maths, he sat at the back, and we're doing this really tedious topic because it's on the syllabus. So I said to them, I put up this shape, and I said, anyone know how you might do it? And anyway, it was obvious, isn't it? And I went, is it? He said, yes, obvious. I went, oh, all right, because I thought it was quite tricky in this. And I said, well, how would you do it? And he told the class, and the way he did it is in no textbook that I've ever seen. He, in set 4, not enjoying maths at all, immediately saw a way that's nowhere, and it's like, wow. And if I presumed that they would have hated it, and I'd just written the theory up and copied this in your books, and now do 20 questions using it, using the verb act, or using this, and da-da-da, it would have sort of died. But because I sort of asked them, how would you do it? I got this real surprise. And I guess that taught me, in that, because I'd projected my stereotypes onto this rather tired, disheartened class, and in fact there was a spark of light. And it was from somewhere where I didn't expect. So I'm just saying, when we teach, in the way we teach, if you leave the door open for them to give something back, which I'm sure most of you do. I mean, I'm aware I'm talking here, and most of you go, oh, I do that. Well, I do that. That's okay. You'll go after 15 minutes and go, yeah, I do all that. So this isn't about me saying, hey, here are new things. You're probably sat there going like, yeah, I did that, yeah, I do that, I don't always do that, but that's okay. So these are just my ideas, leaving the door open to discovery. 3 bits that I put on the row next was, and lots of people do red, amber, green, and my sense of voting is only the same thing. But why I wanted to mention it is because sometimes when you're teaching a class, you're not sure whether they need to practice a bit more or not. And I find they'll tell you, or whether they're bored with a topic, whether they've done it over and they want to move on, they want to try learn a new verb or do a different date in history or something. And if you presume that they want to have fun in class without, stopping working, to say who wants to spend, another 20 minutes on 1585 and who wants to go on to the Battle of Waterloo, and they decide in terms of, well, we've done that, now we want to move on. And I remember one lesson I did, and I was fed up with the topic, and I said, who wants to carry on? And there wasn't one hand in the class who wanted to carry on. I said, well, thank goodness for that, yeah. I wanted to give up as well. And on a sixth form, one time they voted to keep on the topic, and I said to them, I'm sorry, we've got to move on. We need to move on. We tried teaching the next topic, and it was really, really hard. You could just feel in the room that people were going, they were nice kids, but they were going like, we don't understand where we're going on this, we don't understand. And in the end, after about 10 minutes, I said, okay, I give in. We'll go back, you voted to stay on that subject, we'll stay on that subject, because you're not confident. So I do quite a few votes, and that helps to, I put somewhere else there, swimming with the river. When I feel that education is about cooperation, that it's working with them, it tends to flow. When I find that I'm telling them what they're doing next. So sometimes in a lesson, I'll go like, you know, we've just taught this, what would you teach next as a teacher? Where would you go next? So I don't put a learning objective up, partly because I forget, but also, you know, we've done looking after a baby, what would you do next? What would your next topic be? And so they suddenly become the teacher, so you're learning them, you're teaching them to teach. You're learning them how to talk English. So that was sort of cooperation. Student one-to-one feedback, someone you trust. Sometimes you teach your class and you absolutely think, either because you know there's been a complaint in against you, or other things, that it's not going well, it's not going right. And you think, how am I going to do that? And you're not sure, you can't what I call feel the room, you don't know how it's going. So sometimes, and not often, but I have done in year 9 and I've done in year 12, I could ask someone to stay back, someone I trust who's sort of middle of the range. Clearly they're a bit on my side, otherwise I wouldn't open myself open. But I'd say to them, how do you think it's going? You know, is it going all right? You know, what could I do different? So sometimes I'll ask the whole class, but sometimes I'll ask a sort of chosen one person, you know, how's it going? Because I need to hear the feedback, and sometimes they're brave enough to go, well, fine, so accept you could just do that. And it's like, it's really important for me to hear that. So, and in a group of 30, when you ask them to vote, sometimes, oh, well, I better vote, but we move on because, you know. Whereas sometimes in a one-to-one, but a moral story, I used to do, another teacher taught me, do like feedback sheets and hand it in. And at previous school I did that, handed it round in terms of how's the teaching gone, the strengths and the weaknesses. And I don't think this on camera I can quite say exactly what was written down, but it sort of began, I hate you, sir, you're a right. And it was written down, and I'd said to them, you can put it anonymously, don't feel threatened. And this child used the opportunity to absolutely shaft me. And so after that, I wasn't quite as quick to do this, here it is, hand it round. And if I did, I used to give the sheets to another teacher, go, just read those, just check there's nothing personal before I don't mind criticism, but when someone absolutely uses it to have revenge after, you know, 6 months worth of detentions and just say something really personal. I still remember what they said, but sadly I can't say. So, yes, in terms of feedback, feedback's really important, student voice is really important, but our first duty is to be safe to ourselves, so just go steady. Loving the kids. I wanted to say that, and it's the biggest thing there. I don't believe in painting smiles on faces. I went through a divorce whilst I was teaching at one stage, and I said to the head of department, you know, I may have to go at some point, but maybe some mornings where I just come in and go, I can't do this. And I think I say that in terms of, sometimes you have to be congruent, sometimes you come in and you don't love them, you're feeling grumpy. Often it's not because of the kids in front of you, but it's because of the previous class, or what's gone at home, or you couldn't sleep, or the baby. And I do think it's important to say to them, I had a bad night last night, there's not very much sense of humour, just go steady, I'm not in the best place. And my experience is they really respect that. They don't take advantage. If you sort of let them, you don't have to say all the details, but they will give you space. And that's part of love. It's not all like being like sweetie, sweetie, nice, nice, but it's about being straight with them. But I also think that's almost another question. I do think we need to think to ourselves, how does that sit with where I am? Because I don't mean we have to feel like we love them, but we have to like want for them. Just like, I haven't got children, but just like you probably want for your own children to do well. We've got to have that same feeling, and sometimes we lose it, and that's life, and that's the way it goes. But I think it's a good question to go, where am I up to in terms of loving kids, just generally? And I don't mean being any nicey or any more smiley, I just mean, what's my feeling towards them in general? And just as an example, just to be a bit rebellious, if you're at the door sometimes, rather than checking the uniform, which is what we're obliged to do, they might think you're at the door to say hello, and they might actually like that. So whilst you're checking the uniform, don't forget from their point of view, like, yes, saying hello is an important part of their day. Obviously I put down praise, which I'll come on to later, but somebody else was telling me that, I don't know, a student teacher asked them to give artificially too many merits out, loads and loads of merits, and they did it to a bottom set, set 4. And they said it was really strange. The lesson started really happily, and they were getting their books out, and I was giving merits for things I'd never give out. And at the end of the story, they said, okay, you have to fill out a form or something. I think I'd do it again, though. Not quite as much as I did, but it made it a happier class. So just like we often say to senior management, we want praise. You know, we're quite adamant about it. You know, maybe we need to hear the children say, we want praise. And there'll be numbers of you sat there thinking, I already do that. It's absolutely fine. In terms of love and being genuine, sometimes we're in a conflict and it's my fault. Or it's 30% me and 70% them. I'm certainly a player. I'm certainly saying stuff that's unhelpful because I'm really cheesed off. And of course they've started it, but I'm in a bad place as well. So sometimes walking away is just a genuinely good thing to do for my sake. And if I send out the kids, at least to register, partly that's for my benefit, to give me some space. I maybe don't get out, but actually it benefits me because I'm part of this conflict. I may not be the most part, but just to recognise that I'm not the pure one and they're the villain. Not painting a smile, confessing drunkenness. I don't believe in painting on a smile. It feels artificial. I say here, which is controversial, so I'm happy to say it, punish enough so we don't take our anger away from the class. Sometimes I hear teachers threatening and threatening and threatening and coming out of class really fed up. And I go like, so how many detentions did you give after all that? You know, we're carrying the anger away, they're skipping away. Oh, yeah, that's great. And we're carrying the anger away in terms of if we are angry, then we ought to have given a few sanctions just to try and dispel some of it. Yes, I gave an hour. I feel better now. And I told the head of department and their own department report, yes, I'm beginning to... So I do think that just threatening and doing nothing, I don't think that's part of love. But I put immediately afterwards a praise-sanction balance. It's really important to praise and to punish. I haven't brought any children up, but children both need lots and lots of praise for pictures that are rubbish, but they also need to know boundaries. And if they're neglected on their boundaries, that's not love. So if they do stuff that breaks our rules, to forget to punish them actually doesn't make them feel special. Sometimes the kids who I've punished most will come and say at the end of the year, can we have a photo? And I go, this is bizarre. Because, you know, I scarcely like you. You've just wound me up so much. And they come back and go, why? And people say, well, children like boundaries. And I'm beginning to believe that. But yes, so it's not wrong to punish. It really isn't. The math success thing is a system whereby if people do well, I put their names up on the board. I put ticks if they do well and well. It takes me a lot of effort during the lesson. And then I record the number of ticks every lesson. And then at the end of every half term, I do a phone call home, not a postcard, to the parents of the top 5. And I do it for year 11 and year 7. I sometimes even do it with 6th form. And they love it. And it's more important for bottom set, who get very little praise. But there was a boy here 3 years ago who I can't name. And he was from a single father who senior management knew quite well. And I did a phone call home because there were only 11 in the class and he was one of the top 4, which he was going to be in the end. But it was great. I phoned the father and the father said, it's the first good phone call he's ever had. And the phone call was almost as much for the father as it was for the child, because that meant the father wasn't as anti against school, because the father had had a dreadful experience, and that sort of helped the child, as it was, so it worked both ways. But I could talk more about that, but and I've done that for 10 years, every lesson I've ever taught, writing the names up on the board and putting ticks and then doing phone calls. And it does take time, but you can, and the good thing is, you can then give ticks for things that you want. So if you want to promote presentation, you say, the best 3 works, I'm going to put ticks on the board, so they're all writing nicely. The people who work best with their study partners, I'm going to put ticks up, they're all talking to each other. The people who think of the most interesting questions, they're all thinking of an interesting question. So math success, I think, is science success, geography success, history success, Vox success is exactly the same thing. And then just a few things at the end, sort of, as we come to the end of the 25-minute forum. First of all, in terms of motivation, at the very beginning of the year, I sit in front of the class and say, oh, let me introduce myself. My name is Mr. Bedell. And say sometimes with the year 10s, I'll say, so where are we going to go? What's our journey? I say, you're year 10 set 3. Your journey is some of you will get C's and some of you will get D's. And we're going to work together, and over 2 years, that's, as it were, the story for this class. Do we get a C or a D? Where are you in that? To set the picture for them before we begin. And to try to set down certain ways that I work. I talk about math success, I talk about homework. But I just do it almost like Watch with Mother, for the older ones amongst us, where we just sort of sit together and introduce it. And that seems to sort of settle them down. And I just want to say a little bit, I call it hosting a class. It's like being the person who's in charge and saying, my name's Mr. Bedell, let me tell you 5 things about how we're going to work. Occasionally we'll have someone disrupt the class, but most of you want to get your grades. I tell them that, because I hope they do. And I say, therefore, sometimes I have to get rid of one person to look after most of you. So I try to get them buying into the situation. Year 9, this class is about, do we go into top set next year, so I was doing year 9 set 2, and do double maths, or do we just go into a class where we're most likely to get a B rather than an A? And that's what we're working for. For top set, I'll go, this, for some of us, this is preparing, laying foundations for our A level. So it's setting the bigger picture and just sort of showing them where I come from. There was one group, year 10 set 3, who are CD borderline, and I said to them, I wasn't sure if this would work. This was with like 14 and a half, 15-year-olds. I said, for some of you, grade C will be important. For others of you, it won't be that important. And then I thought, this is the risk. I became really brave just for 10 seconds. I said, okay, I said, if grade C is important for you, could I ask you please to stand up? And suddenly, 15 out of the 19 kids stood up. And then, 17 of the 19 stood up, and then the other 2, well, I suppose other 2. But I was really struck that of the 17, people almost leapt to their feet, some of them did. And I was then going to use that moment over and over again later on. But they'd sort of, a bit like the Billy Graham thing, they'd sort of committed themselves to it by standing up. And I said to them, before they sat down, this is really important. 17 of you have stood up straight away. And so you're saying this is, so when it gets hard, when you get tired, when you fall in love, or when something goes wrong and you move and you don't want to do your homework, I want you to remember that today you stood up because it was essential for you to get your C. And so that's part of the hosting bit. That was one little bit that I put in. Everything else, nothing particularly sort of important. Sometimes with the behaviour, if I have 1 or 2, not 5 or 6, but if I have 1 or, sometimes I have 5 or 6, of course, who misbehave. If I have 1 or 2, I'll turn away from them and say, I won't let 19 of you lose your targets because of 2 or 3. No, 2, I wouldn't do that with more than 2. And I'll talk to the main group. I'll turn away from them as I go like, get out. I won't let you guys, and I try, and they'll never say it, but I try to say, as it were, there's a majority who want to get there. And 1 or 2 are stopping us. And if that's the case, if it's 5 or 6, that doesn't work. But if it's 1 or 2, then it does sort of work. A little thing I put down, which will be no news to any of you, I wrote down, I don't like what you're doing. That's just occasionally, it's a behaviour strategy, but you all know that. It's not I don't like you, but because kids sometimes think we don't like them if we punish them. You ate me, sir. So just trying to say that you mustn't do, that doing that will give you detention. So it's about doing rather than being. A bit before I come on to my last thing, I once played, which was just for fun. In maths, we have different classes going on at the same time, and I had a set 4, and another teacher had a set 3, and it was getting a bit, we were tired, we didn't know what to do, and they were fed up, so we had a quiz. Our top 3 against the next set up top 3, and they came in, and they stood at, the 2 teams stood at the back, and there were questions on the front. It was amazing. It was like they were at an away game, When our guys played it, everyone was going like, yes, yes. And when they got it, everyone was going like, ooh, you don't know, do you? You don't know. God, you're looking rattled. God, he's sweating, he's sweating. And the guys who were in the higher set above were looking like really worried. And I thought, and then they said at the end, right, you're coming back to play in our classroom, you're having an away game. So this notion of playing in another classroom against another thing, it was really scary for them. And the lower set beat the upper set, which was always, I think it's always good for morale. If you can arrange, obviously you both have to have done the same questions, but sometimes if you've coached them a bit, it's good for the morale of the less able to give the more able a bit of a stuffing occasionally. And finally I wanted to say that I believe kids do want to succeed. I don't believe that because I'm on camera or because whatever, but that's the way I work. I genuinely believe people get bored if things are too easy for them and if things are too hard for them. I do think that most kids, most of the time, want to make progress. And because of that, and that's got a lot of consequences, if you believe that kids will actually, then you can say to kids, there are 10 questions, start where you want to. Because work at a level, this is more a mathsy thing. In humanities, it's not quite the same, because probably all the questions are much the same, apart from perhaps agreeing the endings or something, which would be at a sort of higher level, as it were. You know, if they're feminine rather than masculine, we have to put an E on the end, or for example. But because of that, I think we genuinely ought to have a little place in our hearts where we nurture guilt, so that if I can see a kid in the class who's one of my best ones, who's finished and sat there, I should feel guilty. It's like, I'm holding them back. They won't go up a set. They won't get to university. They won't. I once taught someone who was going to go on and be a maths professor, and I felt amazingly guilty. I've got to make sure he's got enough to do. So extension isn't just to tick a box. It's so that some child doesn't go home and go like, maths is easy. I do nothing really. I've got one child who I sort of feel like that at the moment. So I'm not a great believer in guilt, and as teachers we work very, very hard, but I think a little bit on guilt. And other little bits, as I say, just to finish, kids want to succeed, they want to be loved. I genuinely believe they want to be loved. Of course there are occasions when they want to hate you, because they hate grown-ups and their parents and you, whatever. But by and large, especially if they've hated you one lesson, they want to think that when you walk down the corridor, that you're not going to go like, oh God, here we come. That they want to feel that even if they're going to be foul to you again, they want the warmth. I'm not saying that means we should give them the warm reception. Suddenly we're badly confused if they've given us a kicking. But they want somebody to be smiling when they see them. Just like we do. If we turn up to performance management and we're sat there, they're like, right, okay then. And you go, oh God, here we go. So you want someone to love you. And partly that, don't feel that punishment isn't loving. Sometimes it's like what I said before, sometimes punishment, I don't want to end on this isn't my finale, but it's like the finale is kids want to be loved. But the notion that there is a clear boundary and that there are consequences for that is part of love. And don't feel guilty about that. And I was chatting this over with someone and they said just on that, some kids are really good at seeing punishments to do with one lesson and one set of behaviour, and they'll come back and they'll be like quite bouncy about it. And they'll see, yeah, I did that wrong and whatever, and let's move on. And we're thinking, oh God, they won't speak to me for 5 lessons. And often they aren't like that. I guess my experience is, so that was what somebody else said, my experience is more I have to be the one who's sort of going like, it's all right. Whereas inside I'm going like, yep, not quite painting a smile, but I'm trying to go like, yep, so well done, so math success, and so I'm not necessarily smiling, but I'm trying to reward them by using their name. Yeah, and maybe that's not a final thing, but just to end on. If you criticise a child or children, this doesn't work all the time, but if you do, don't use their name. Gentlemen at the back, you're talking, warnings to both of you, as opposed to, well done Sharon, that's excellent. You use Sharon's rule, I said for a 6th form, because Sharon isn't a real name. Do you mind if we use we've discovered the Smith, as it were, the Smith formula, and this child said, could we call it the Smith formula? And I went, yes, absolutely, of course we can. And they were bold as brass, whoa, we've got the Smith formula. And of course it wasn't new, but this was a 6th former feeling good. So use their name for praise. And of course sometimes you have to say, John, stop doing that. If you're always saying, John, stop doing that. John, it's like their name is associated with anger and negative, and then that sort of builds up. So use whatever positives for them. And there you go. That's it.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you. Thank you very much.